everyone. Mrs. Croft here with another story. Today we're going to learn about pollinator. But before we get into the story, let's talk about our vocabulary, or the words we need to think about while we're listening to the story. So our first word is honey. I'm sure all of you know what honey is. It's a sweet, sticky food that's made by bees, but it's made from the nectar of the flowers. Nectar. Nectar is the sweet liquid that is in flowers that bees and sometimes birds collect it. Petals. Petals are the colored part of the flower, or the outer part. Pollen. Pollen is a fine yellowish powder found in the center of the flowers. Pollination. When pollen from one flower lands on another flower, and the second flower makes seeds. So what happens is the bee crawls around, or the wind blows, and it blows the pollen from one flower to another one, and that fertilizes the seeds. So let's get started with our read aloud. Hello, my name is Polly, and I'm a honeybee. I live in a beehive in a meadow not too far from here. A meadow is a flat area of land that usually is covered with grass and flowers. Your teacher asked me to come here today to tell you more about flowers. My favorite part of the plants is the flowers. As you have learned, flowers contain seeds, and seeds can grow into new plants. I'm delighted to come and tell you about flowers because flowers are one of my favorite things in the whole world. The meadow near my beehive is full of all different kinds of flowers that come in many different colors. Earlier today, I visited a particularly delicious yellow flower. Come along and I'll show it to you. Why would she say a flower is delicious? Let's think about that for a minute. Delicious flower? Discuss that with someone that you're with. Here's the flower I was telling you about. Do you see this ring of bright yellow parts around here? Really bright? Well, those are called the petals. The petals look like bright colored leaves. The petals are the parts of the flower that grab my attention. And when I'm buzzing around, once I see a pretty flower, my favorite thing is to crawl inside the petals right into the center of the flower. What's it like to crawl inside a flower like this? Well, if you'd close your eyes, can you imagine for 1 minute that you're crawling under a bright yellow blanket and it's very, very comfortable? It's like a comfortable bed. Bright yellow is all around you. Now imagine that you stay under that blanket and you're drinking the world's most tastiest drink through a straw. You are so happy that you wiggle around and you get covered with all this yellow powder and it smells great and it feels good against your skin. That's what it's like for me when I visit a flower. So how does Polly feel when she's visiting a flower? Sounds to me like she feels pretty good. As far as I'm concerned, the world's tastiest drink is called nectar, which is a sweet juice that plants make, and the yellow powder that I like to rub up against is called pollen. So say the word nectar, and now say the word pollen. I find both nectar and pollen inside flowers, and frankly, I'm not sure which one I like better. I visit more than 50 flowers in one outing, sometimes as many as 100. I visit these flowers because we bees get our food from flowers. My job is to fly around and find nectar and pollen, which I gather up and take back to my hive. I have a special pouch inside my body that holds the nectar, and there's a special hairs on my back legs that form little baskets that I brush the pollen into. And when it's time to go back to my hive, sometimes my load of pollen and nectar weighs half as much as I do. Do you think it's easy or difficult for a bee to take nectar and pollen to its hive? Why would you think it would be hard? Now, when I get back to the hive, I turn the nectar and pollen over to the worker bees in the hive. They mix the pollen with a little bit of nectar and feed it to the baby bees. Then they fan the rest of the nectar with their wings until most of the water is all gone or it's evaporated. Nectar with most of the water gone turns into something that both bees and people love. That's right. Nectar with most of the water removed is called honey. Here's the honey in my hive. People use honey to sweeten their food, but we bees use honey for food. We keep it in a bunch of little cubbies that we call honeycomb. I visit flowers to get food, and that's reason enough for me. But it turns out that I'm also doing something else besides finding food for myself and the other bees. I'm helping the plants reproduce or make more plants. In order to make a seed that can develop into a new plant, most plants need to mix pollen from their own flowers with pollen from other flower plants that are just like them. For example, a corn plant needs pollen from another corn plant to allow it to grow and make seeds. When pollen from one corn plant lands on another corn plant, something called pollination takes place. Pollination is when pollen from one flower mixes with pollen from another flower of the same plant and can make seeds. Pollination is really important because if it doesn't happen, the plant won't be able to make any seeds. If there are no seeds, then there will be no new plants. How do plants get pollen from other plants? Well, plants can't walk around like human beings, and they can't flap their wings and fly like us bees either. So luckily, the pollen grains themselves are very, very small, and they can be blown from one plant to another by the wind. So the wind helps pollinate plants. They can make new plants. But bees, like me, also help pollinate plants. How do my trips from one plant to another plant help pollinate the plants? Let's think about that. Well, when I visit a flower and roll around on the inside, I pick up a lot of pollen on my body. And when I fly to the next flower, I carry some of that pollen from other flowers with me, and it rubs off on the next flower. That's why I'm an excellent pollinator of plants, and that is why they call me Polly the Pollinator. I don't like to brag, but we bees are the most important pollinators in the world. Oh sure, the wind helps pollinate, and some other insects also carry grains of pollen from one plant to another as they feed. But butterflies do it too, and moths and beetles and wasps. Some birds, like hummingbirds, are also good pollinators. Bats are really good pollinators too, but no other creature pollinates as many flowers as bees do. Well, thank you for listening to our little read aloud today. Let's see if we have some comprehension questions in our book, and let's go through it and see what you know. Number 1, where are the petals in the picture on this plant? That's right, they're the bright yellow petals around the middle of the flower. Why do bees visit flowers? If you said bees visit flowers because they get nectar and pollen from the flowers for food, you are right. What is nectar? Nectar is the sweet juice made by plants. What is pollen? Pollen is that yellow powder made by plants. Now, how do bees help a plant pollinate or mix its pollen with another plant? If you said bees visit other plants and some of the pollen the bees carry from the first plant rubs off onto the other plants, you were correct. So why is pollination important? It's important because plants need pollen from other plants in order to make new seeds. What would happen if pollination didn't even happen? If there were no pollination, there would be no new seeds. So the plants wouldn't grow. Let's do some word work now. In the read aloud, When pollen from one corn plant lands on another corn plant, something called pollination takes place. Say the word pollination with me. Pollination. Pollination happens when the pollen from two flowers mix up and the seeds are made. Honeybees help a lot with pollination of plants. What other ways could pollination happen? I think we talked about it. You're right. The wind can help with pollination and other bugs and insects, sometimes birds and bats and butterflies. Try to use the word pollination when you talk about it. And discuss this with someone else, a partner or another adult. It would be fun to talk about it with your family. What's the word we've been talking about? Pollination. Well, thank you for listening today, and I hope you enjoyed learning about polly. We'll learn some more about polly next time.